And welcome back to Salmon's Pizzeria, your slice of Scottish football. This weekend, we enjoyed the League Cup round of 16, which means Ethan had a quiet weekend. Ethan, how are you?
Yeah, no, I'm all right. Obviously, would have liked to have been part of the action on Saturday, but things happened. The defeat to Alloa, had to make us crawl before the draw at Ibrox had us walking. So
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to check out a bit about that defeat to Alloa, then you can in our race against the South team. Yeah, our race of the 42. Ethan and I enjoyed a sleepless night. Well, it was a sleepless night for me, anyways. You can go and see that. That's our last video. So if you want to check that out, I am also joined by Craig, who maybe didn't enjoy the football that he watched. Craig, how was your weekend?
Well, you would be spot on about that. It wasn't great, if I'm honest. But aside from that, it's been a good weekend. Can't complain.
Good, yeah. Well, we'll start then with the League Cup, but we have a few more things to talk about as well. We'll go into the Friday night game where the holders Celtic saw off new Premier League boys or new Premiership boys Falkirk. Ethan, it was a pretty normal result, nothing really out of the ordinary at Celtic Park.
yeah, no, I think the main sort of thing going into this game was the fact they'd played each other previously. I think was it last season. I don't know if it was the same cup. Um, but Falkirk, we knew were a team that they're good in the ball going forward. They're capable of scoring goals, but I think perhaps because they're so open that makes them so vulnerable to conceding so many on the other end. So I think it's going to be a familiar theme we're going to see with Falkirk unless they can bolster up a bit better. I think in the transfer window, have some more shrewd business to come in. So I think on one hand, again, they're all always up against it at a place like that. So you can't dig into it too much, I suppose. But at the same time, like I said, there's patterns there that if they become too familiar, then you may be looking at serious problems down the line. Um, but yeah, as you say, it's just kind of routine stuff on the other end. So what more is there to say?
Yeah, Craig, John McGlynn said after the game, Celtic fans have been asking for more and more signings, but I didn't seem to see any issues with that. Is that still a concern for Celtic fans, or are they starting to click with what's there already?
I think the main issue that they will have is looking to the European stage because domestically they're basically secure to win the league almost every season. It's just looking for that number nine, which I think they've been lacking over the last few seasons. Obviously, they brought in Adam Ida from Norwich for around £9 million, but I don't think he's been much of a success. And then they've sort of had to shoehorn Maeda up top, which isn't his main position, I would say. So probably need to look for a striker, but that's about it in terms of signings, I would say.
Yeah, and just on that, I think today Brendan Rodgers did touch on, or was certainly asked in his press conference about signings. Do you think it's strange, Ethan, the lack of signings for Celtic, do you kind of share the opinion that I have that the signings of Ida, as Craig mentioned, and Engels, the pair of them costing the side 20 million, has almost destroyed the infrastructure they've built up so well over the years in terms of clubs will demand that sort of fees from them now.
Yeah, perhaps you're right. I think on one hand, you've got Celtic don't have that kind of money to be splashing every single season, and they've signed these guys. I think with the vision that they are players for the long term too. I don't think they're really in a position where they have to really spend all that much. They can get disappointed about the lack of transfer action, but as Craig said, they're kind of like a stick on to win the league. To sweep things up domestically is kind of the bare minimum at Celtic. The is there really much expectation for them to do much in Europe? Because it's, I think, obviously they did very well against Bayern Munich, but they only done very well because there is obviously such a disparity between the two teams in the first place. And I don't think any amount of, if they spent twenty million pounds every season, I don't think that really closes the gap. Realistically, the Champions League's just a completely different pond compared to the Premiership. So I think we'll still see some signings come in for them. I think today they were saying about there's the potential of Jamie Vardy, and you can see that maybe kind of taken form in the sense that the fans are quite vocal that they don't feel Ida's doing enough. Uh, I've not watched enough to really comment on Adam Ida, but the way I see it is if you're going to spend £9 million, £10 million on a striker, you've kind of got to back your man. And if there's someone available, like the agent that has that kind of higher caliber like Vardy, then yeah, I think that's probably a stick on. But I couldn't really inform you where they would have to invest. I find that quite, like I say, almost tedious at times. I'd say, oh, do they need a six? Do they right back? Like, they're vastly superior to anything else in the Premiership at the moment, and that's all they'll really be fussed about. You know what, they might make is it 28 million per season they get from the Champions League just for qualifying. They win the league,
Yeah, it's certainly something
So
like that. Yeah, I mean, just as you said there about that kind of Champions League quality and taking the step up. We are filming this on Tuesday night, and it has just gone 3-0 to Club Brugge at Ibrox. So it's not great fun for me. It looks like some more Thursday night actions for Rangers. So we'll just move on to Ibrox, where maybe not a surprising outcome, but there was certainly a surprising scoreline in the fact that Alloa managed to get two in the 4-2 loss to Rangers. Connor Salmon, if he had faster legs, would maybe have got one himself as he ran through. But just to go back to yourself, Craig, that was some pretty comical defending from Rangers, which is something we've come to expect under Russell Martin.
Yeah, it definitely is. I just think it's one of the things I can't figure it out. They try to bring in players, defensive players, a lot of the time, and it just never seems to work. I don't know if it's just the mentality at Rangers. The only I was talking about this the other day. There, most teams have about 4 or 5 players that are guaranteed to start every week. Rangers, I don't even think have one. Like it could change week by week. I mean, maybe Jack Butland, but then again, he was sort of at fault for that comical defending goal against Alloa, obviously, to make it
Well,
1-1
so it
at
was
the time.
Liam Kelly that was in goals at the
Oh,
weekend,
Liam
but
Kelly,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah, Liam Kelly um, as well. So it was between them, it was. I think they do need to try strengthen again by the time their window closes.
yeah, Ethan. Prior to this weekend, Alloa were one of the teams who had remained unbeaten in the kind of main competitions, as it were. They were pretty strong in the league. I think they've won both their games in the league. Obviously, won every game in the League Cup group stage, as you saw, and still a pretty decent showing from them at Ibrox. Even going 3-1 down, there seemed to be no fear in that side.
yeah, I mean, I guess Lyle Cameron isn't the only part-time wonder at Ibrox after all. Yeah, obviously they've given themselves a great account. They were always never really going to get a result at Ibrox. Realistically, I think the times of when Alloa had that capability, you're talking that was obviously when Rangers were struggling in the lower divisions. So all they could really ask was that they go there, give it their all, and hopefully give their fans something to shout about. So you feel quite happy as a neutral that they had that equaliser. Um, just so the fans will always kind of have that moment, because those are so kind of far and few in between for a team like Alloa, and I mean that obviously respectfully. Um, they look like a good side from what we saw. Obviously, we were both there, Alex, for the cup game against Dundee. I thought they were excellent on the day. They came across to me as a team that was quite robust. They had a plethora of different strengths, and they just knew how to utilize them at different times. And in that particular game, of course, when Connor Salmon came on, it was just all the little things that come a long way into getting that full time result. And as you said there, if only his thighs were just a little bit thicker, then maybe he could have bagged one for himself. Um, but yeah, no, it's like I say, in terms, as far as analysis goes, there isn't too much to say about this one as well, because it speaks for itself. They've done their fans proud. Difficult venue, but I'm sure they enjoyed it nonetheless. They got their moment, and for Rangers, I think they'll be a bit red faced. I think if I'm thinking of the right goal, I can't remember the chronicle order of the Alloa goals, but the one I'm thinking of, it was a complete calamity.
The first one,
Um,
yeah. I mean, the second
First
one
one,
wasn't much better, but the first one was the real mess.
yeah, exactly. I think the main kind of takeaway from that game is exactly that: is how do Rangers going to shape up the defending? Because that seems to be a problem. Whilst Russell Martin is obviously still new, it's early days at Rangers. This has been a consistent problem that's not really been addressed. And obviously, at the time of recording, they're currently 3-0 down at home in a European game. So, yeah, there's got to be, I think, questions answered on the defending skill for Rangers.
Yeah, and just to go back on your Alloa comments there, I thought when we watched them against Dundee, one of the standouts was Taggart, and he certainly was one of the
Yeah.
standouts at Ibrox again. He's the one who ends up grabbing the second goal. Yeah, I would entirely agree. Rangers look soft defensively. They look sloppy defensively, as we saw, I think, with the first goal for Bruges tonight, and well, even with the second and possibly the third as well. They're just far too soft in defence. There's no consistency in the defence, as you mentioned, Craig. We're not sure whether first choice is going to be Tavernier or Aarons or at right back this season. We've just brought in a new left back. Three of the back four who are playing tonight are on loan. It's not kind of painting a great picture, especially when your manager Russell Martin was a defender in his playing days. So you'd probably expect to be conceding a few less than we have so far, anyways. And I think maybe the short stick is the positives, and it is the fact that, albeit it is Alloa, you have to beat what's in front of you, and we managed to score multiple goals. We scored four for the first time under Russell Martin, four for the first time, more than once for the first time domestically under Russell Martin, which is maybe something that kind of just gives you the chance to take that into future games with a tough kind of schedule coming up with St Mirren away, followed by the old firm at Ibrox. It's certainly not going to be an easy kind of way into life, and Russell Martin's found that out already. But we'll move on from Rangers, and we will stick close though. We will go to Paisley. Craig, I'll go to you for your comments first. Hearts obviously lose out on penalties. It's 1-1 after 90 minutes and after 120 minutes. But do you think Derek McInnes got the setup right? Because he seems to have done so in most games so far for Hearts.
I don't think he did. If I'm honest, it was the same last weekend against Dundee United again. He started off with the back three, which made us susceptible to set pieces, which is weird. Which you would think it would be able to handle it better. Um, but then in that Dundee United game, we changed it to the back four, and then we go on to win the game. And then obviously starting off in Paisley, St Mirren, we go back to the back three for whatever reason, even though it didn't work last weekend, and it didn't work again. Alex Gogic gets free at the back post, unmarked, for a volley to make it 1-0 in the 35th minute, and from then it was basically, would they add a second? Luckily, they didn't manage to, and we got the equaliser in the end. But I don't think we done enough to win the game. Um, it was a pretty poor performance from Hearts in general, and for the games that we've seen under McInnes, is probably the worst performance so far.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, Ethan, I think a lot of Hearts fans have been, pretty pleased with how the season started. Two wins in the league so far already, sitting up there. And Derek McInnes is a manager who has the know-how in Scotland, but it's always a hard place to go, St Mirren, and Stephen Robinson will be happy to see his club into another quarter final.
St Mirren at home can beat anyone. I think they've shown that time and time again. They've got a tremendous record against the old firm when they visit Paisley. So again, it was never going to be an easy game. I'll always make the argument that when it comes to the Premiership, there is no such thing as an easy game. Even though things can read such a way on paper, it's just not how it translates to in practice. And yeah, I think they had their hopes up. There was a quote I read from McInnes where he was on about how they had the ambition to win the League Cup, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. But obviously, it just doesn't really bide well going out the cup. I mean, the first game afterwards. But there's an old saying that I believe in, that that a team isn't really judged by its shortcomings. They're judged by how they react to those shortcomings. So I think that whilst as disappointing as this is, because Hearts are a club that are kind of expected to compete for these cups, expected to go to Hampden quite regularly. This will probably just serve as fuel for when the Scottish Cup campaign comes around. And sometimes, that silver lining in the long run could be just what you need. You look at any team ever that has a great season, that accomplishes something, at some point, they often say they had to make up for a previous result. There was a horrible defeat, a horrible circumstance, and they had to bounce back from that. And this could be one of those. But on the other side as well, you got to look at St Mirren and say, um, no one. I don't think anyone in the draw wants to have Hearts at home, especially Derek McInnes side. Derek McInnes, you say about having the know-how in Scottish football. You've got to remember he won this cup with Aberdeen back in 2014. He's trying to replicate that success with Hearts. He's been well backed at Hearts. They managed to bring in players or keep players in some cases that he trusts. So on their part, it's no surprise that they had to win on penalties. That it would be a narrow game. But Stephen Robinson, for the consistency that he brings St Mirren, he's already got in European football. It was the first time they got into Europe since 1987, when they qualified 2 seasons ago. Now, whilst they still want to stay consistent, try and fight for another top six place, see if they can do the three-peat, they'll be beginning to think to themselves, well, how far could they go in the cup? Because now it's just it's the quarter-final. It's the quarter-final next.
It's
Yeah,
indeed,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so they'll be playing away to Kilmarnock, another tough game. But then you just think you're 90 minutes away from Hampden, and then from that point on, anything's possible. I would never rule out a Stephen Robinson side from going all the way.
Yeah, and it's a good point you raised there. I'll touch on that as well. St Mirren are, as you said, they're very good at their home ground. I think they're pretty decent away as well. They are a really tough team to break down under Stephen Robinson, and he seems to have a good cup run. We have to remember that he took Motherwell quite far in this competition. And if he was to do the same with St Mirren, as you say there, Ethan, it wouldn't come as too much of a surprise because he is highly regarded. He has a high reputation in Scottish football for a reason. But Craig, just to kind of maybe go in a little bit more on Hearts' shortcomings on Saturday, it's not been a tough thing for Hearts to score many goals this season. Is that kind of maybe an applause to the St Mirren defence, or was it an off day for the front line?
I think it's an applause to the set piece coach. Um, we have on. I can't recall us scoring a goal from open play this season so far in the league. I think there was a couple in the League Cup, but yeah, no. Defensively, I think both teams were quite well organised. Obviously, we only conceded one goal each. Um, I think it was just the forward areas that both teams lacked in, which was why none of the teams could win the game in normal time or extra time. It had to be decided by penalties. And as you say, Paisley is probably one of the toughest grounds to go to get a result for any team.
Yeah. As you say, they'll be looking forward to their tie, which will be, as Ethan says, away to Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock, obviously, through there maybe be a little bit of a smile on Ethan's face here because Dundee United have joined Dundee in the dumped teams from this year's League Cup. Ethan, there is a smile on your face. Kilmarnock, much the better side in Sunday's game.
Yeah, I was getting a lot of big licks on Twitter on the morning of it. And I just thought, how daft to be doing that just before you're due a game. So that's it's nice when things come full circle. I actually caught a fair bit of the game as well because I was at a pub to watch the Arsenal Man United game, and they had the United Killer game on at the same time because they overlapped for a bit. So I caught a fair bit of the Kilmarnock game. I've obviously watched the highlights back too. The first goal is just for Deckers. It's just route one, a simple route one ball. He does very well to take it in control and convert it away, but it comes across far too easy. And I think there's some fears beginning to surface around Dundee United in the shape of defending, particularly around set pieces, which is where the Kilmarnock winning goal comes from. It comes from a set piece, albeit the ball's through the keeper's legs quite in a dodgy way. The setup for it all comes from a set play. And you look at the weekend before, when they played Hearts. Hearts scored from 2 corners via Stuart Finlay. And the Rapid Vienna game as well at Tannadice, I want to say they scored from a corner as well. So corner kicks, set plays as a whole, but corner kicks seems to be a real Achilles heel for this United team at the moment, and they'll be bitterly disappointed. That's what's going to cost them going out the cup, especially now their next game is the Dundee derby, and Dundee. If anything, that's the one thing we've got going for us is we're a very good set piece team this season. I think almost all of our goals have came from set plays. The goal at Ibrox certainly came from a set play. And we'll play for it because we know that we've got the quality deliveries in our locker. And you watch just any of those Dundee goals. It's not just the quality of the delivery, but the execution as well and the headers. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to keep it there in mind when we get to the point of the derby. That's still another week away, because obviously United have got a free weekend, and Dundee are back to league business. Funnily enough, also away to Kilmarnock. But from the Kelly perspective, they'll be delighted. Home draw against a team that probably, on normal circumstance, would do better. You got to mind United have played 120 minutes on the Thursday night, so they'll have the Friday the day off. A training session on the Saturday, a very light one, most likely, because it's now 90 minutes on a plastic turf. That you can't imagine the state of the legs off the back of that. So, yeah, with Kelly, it's the same as St Mirren, 90 minutes away from getting to Hampden, and they'll be delighted they've got the home tie for that game too. On United's end, that's a run of three run. I'll try that again. That's a run of three straight defeats, with set plays being the main, the main issue they need to address.
Yeah, I think as you touched on there, tired legs will maybe be one of their excuses. But if we go to the opposite side in Kilmarnock, Craig, a team that maybe a few thought would not do too well this year with the loss of Derek McInnes, loss of a couple of key players as well. But one I think which we need to talk about early on in this season is the young fullback Ben Brannan. He spent the second half of last season on loan at Cali Thistle in the Highlands. And then last week against Hibs, he scores one of what will eventually be a goal of the season contender. And then this week, as Ethan touched on with the Route 1 first goal, plays an unbelievable pass to Marcus Dackers for the opening goal. Just how good has he been in this Kilmarnock side?
I can't say I've watched much of Kilmarnock this season, but from what I have seen, he's been a very influential player for Kilmarnock so far this season. I want to say it was three goals he got in the group stage for them, I think. But no,
Definitely did score in the group stage because there was quite a howler on open goal about that. Someone said they'll make a bet that he won't score for the entire season, and then he's pointed out, well, he's already scored.
Yeah, he scored. I mean, he scored. He did score. He did score three. He also assisted. Well, he's got that assist now as well. But yeah, I saw him in the flesh. He came up to play against Brora Rangers in one of their League Cup games, and it was a switch from him and what's the other fullback's name now? Used to play for Livingston.
Jamie Brandon.
Jamie Brandon, yeah. So him and Jamie Brandon were playing the opposite sides, and Brandon just couldn't really kind of get the better of his man. They switched sides. Brandon was much better on the right, and Ben Brannan got the goal on the left, and that just kind of clicked for Kilmarnock. They looked a lot better. But yeah, Ben Brannan has certainly been a great addition to their squad, and one which is from the youth team rather than buying from another club. So good to see, and hopefully a nice young Scottish talent for the future. Just away from the League Cup, then Ethan. I mean, we've touched on Dundee a couple of times. They seem to be kind of maybe getting a bit better as the weeks go on. I know a lot of people, myself included, after watching them away to Alloa, had written Presley off fairly early. But you seem to have a little bit of confidence at the time that time would heal Dundee, and it seems to be coming that way.
Yeah, I think at the time of those League Cup games, we were fully acknowledged, and the club weren't exactly shy about saying it. They said, well, look, we're behind where we want to be. We're willing to take these early bruises. We'll take a bit of pain before we get things right. We're trailing behind in the transfer market. We're going to take our time and build the team because it's a lot of key players Dundee lost across the summer. It wasn't just Lyle Cameron and Josh Mulligan, albeit they are going to be big misses. That's Scott Tiffany moving on, Mo Silla moving on, Jordan McGee moving on, Joe Shaughnessy moving on. Quite a lot of heavy hitters in what would be players you would identify with the typical Dundee lineup over the past 2 years. But now I think the result at Ibrox, but more importantly, the performance at Ibrox for the fans and for the players, that builds foundations of belief. Because when we played Hibs the week before, we were quite good defensively off the ball, and that was kind of it. On the ball, we were quite poor. Decision making was a heavy issue. And what we saw at Ibrox was the defensive shape again was still solid, but this time they had a lot more cohesion. Everyone was in sync, reading off the same script. Joe Wesley had a real baptism of fire of a debut, away to Ibrox in front of a 50,000 crowd. Um, you don't get debuts tougher than that on paper, I don't think. And I thought he was excellent. He linked up play really well, and Dundee just seemed to have a lot of bravery on the ball, which was really reassuring. In my living memory, it's the best performance I've seen from a Dundee team at Ibrox, and I felt we were very unlucky not to come away with the 3 points. But regardless, we'll come out of that thinking, we played well. We limited Rangers to a small, can't even say a handful of chances, because I don't think it was enough to constitute a handful. Limited Rangers, and obviously we played for set pieces. Looked the threat, scored from one, hit the post twice. Like I say, there's definitely we can see what Stephen Presley's trying to build now, and I've always been of the belief that you wait until the end of the transfer window, and then that's when you judge, because then there's no excuse. That the team should be together at that point. And it's coming along all right from the looks of things. Like I say, that was a very reassuring performance to see. And by the time we're next out, we'll get to see Simon Murray back from injury. We'll get to see Jan Danda make his Dundee debut. Of course, they were a very formidable partnership when they played together at Ross County. So hopefully that pre-established relationship on the pitch comes back to life for us for the foreseeable. Like I say, from just now, it kind of feels like the only way with Dundee is up. It's only going to go from strength to strength.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Ross County there. We'll stick with a couple of championship clubs here. First of all, Partick Thistle 2, Ayr United 0. That one was for our good friend Kieran Ashton over at Partick Thistle. Will be delighted to see that result, and Mark Wilson and co earn themselves a huge tie, glamour tie, really, at home to Celtic in the next round. Ethan, I'll stay with you on this one. Partick are always kind of up there in terms of coming up to the Premiership, but a cup run can kind of help with that confidence to maybe click things together in what is going to be inevitably a tough and long season with the likes of St Johnstone and Ross County going down.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to look at it from. The first being when you have momentum in football, that's obviously massive. So if you can keep momentum on all fronts, that's huge. Confidence as well is a major factor. So if you find yourself, having an off week in the league, what do you say? Oh, it's the cup game. Suddenly, it's like your league form goes out the window and it's the cup. It's a complete mentality switch. So if you have, obviously, goes without saying, if simultaneously you're winning on both fronts, your confidence is high, your momentum is high, you're in the perfect place. It's where you want to be. And for a club like Thistle as well, a club that wants to challenge to get back in the Premiership, that's why you don't even write off a run in the Challenge Cup, because it has that same effect, I think. Different with the Challenge Cup, because I make the argument that if you win it, you also get from a player's perspective, you get that experience of popping the champagne in the dressing room, kind of bonds the team a bit together closer, which I think is quite important if you're trying to nail on a full-on bid for promotion at the end of the line. But in this case, like I said, they're through the next round in the cup. And who did they beat? You said Ayr United. I'm afraid I've never heard of them before. I'm familiar with the trademark Scott Brown's Ayr United that I hear all the fucking time through BBC Sport.
You raise a good point there, but Craig, Scott Brown's Ayr United have not started the season well at all. I mean, obviously got through the League Cup group stage, which is an impressive feat when you're a championship side. But they can't get past a fellow championship side in Partick. In the league, they've played 2, won none, drawn 1, lost 1. It's not the start they would be hoping for this season, when realistically they'd be wanting to push for playoffs.
Yeah, I think especially after the season they had last year, getting into the playoffs, obviously getting knocked out by Partick Thistle in the end, they would want to get back there so far. And obviously, it's not been too great. I can say the one game I did watch of Ayr United this season so far was against St Mirren at Paisley, and that was quite a good performance from them. But since that game, it's been a draw to Arbroath, and then obviously a defeat to Wraith Rovers, and then losing out to Partick Thistle in the League Cup, which is not the start Scott Brown's Ayr United would be looking for.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, Logan Chalmers came across very influential. And he's a big player for them last season. So we talk about earlier on about recruitment from from the Celtic perspective. Forget recruitment. Keeping a hold of your key players can be just as important. So if Partick Thistle can leave this summer with Logan Chalmers still in in their lineup, then they've got just as good a chance as any. I've seen it time to time again with teams that try to compete in that division. Sometimes when you have that kind of player that can come to the rescue, pull you out the danger, pull you out the danger. Um, I hate the term carried, that this player carries the team, but
Yeah.
when you have that kind of element, like I say, that's invaluable.
Yeah.
And Chapman was that.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. From one championship side to the next, then St Johnstone, who are obviously hopeful of going up, and had also started the season very strongly, winning all of their games, including what was probably an early sign of where they want to go with the 3 points in Dingwall, picking up against a stubborn Ross County who didn't seem to do much attacking wise, but were holding them out until late on. But they end up taking Motherwell to extra time. Motherwell also decent form so far. Simo Valakari will maybe be slightly disappointed that they end up out in extra time and don't manage to take it to penalties. But Craig, all in all, a decent showing from both sides, really.
Yeah, especially after the season St Johnstone had last season, the way they've started this season so far, up until that defeat to Motherwell, they were unbeaten in 7 games. 7 games, including the trip to Dingwall. So it's been a very good start from Simo Valakari. I said as soon as he got appointed as their manager that they would do quite well, because they actually want to play a good style of football. And I think being down in the championship, hope, hopefully for St Johnstone fans, only for the season, will be good. Allows their players to gain confidence playing that way and hopefully return to the Premiership next season.
Yeah, they'll certainly be hoping that. As for Motherwell, Ethan, a trip to the northeast in Aberdeen is up next for them, but they won't really be too worried about it because they've started pretty strongly. A draw against Rangers in the opening day of the season, now through as well to the quarterfinals away to St Johnstone, albeit some might say it was an easier draw, but as we've touched on, St Johnstone have started the season strongly. Do you think they can maybe go a step further?
Yeah, I think if there's any team you'd want to play in the Premiership right now, it arguably is Aberdeen. They're on a bit of a downward slope, and this actually tracks really well. I just said about how big momentum is and confidence in football. Aberdeen have none at this moment in time. They got the win. Obviously, we'll touch on that against Morton, but as against teams of their own level in the Premiership, they ended last season uh, on a bit of a grim note. League wise, they obviously won the Scottish Cup, and they've started the league season in the same sort of slump. They need to kind of give themselves a bit of a shake. So if you're Motherwell, you're going there with kind of no fear at all. I think, and Motherwell have got a very good squad. I think on paper, and of course with Lennon Miller going out the door as well. There's money now to kind of reinvest, and they've always been a club that I don't think are shy on splashing the cash when appropriate. I'm trying to remember who it was they brought in after the sale of Theo Bair, but they bought a couple of they purchased a couple of players on the back of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they made the same investment again. They've got players that can hunt any team in the division. I'm a big fan of Mas Wanhise.
Yeah.
When I'm about players that can carry you, what effectively trying to say is that you're match winners, and I think Motherwell have got a couple of them. Mas Wanhise being one. They've just signed Callum Hendry as well, who actually, funnily enough, used to play for Aberdeen at a time when Aberdeen, I think, had Florian Camberry, Fraser Hornby, and Callum Hendry at the same time. Hendry was expected to be the kind of bronze medal in that pecking order and actually proved to be the best of the lot, albeit Hornby and Camberry were obviously, I think, big disappointments up in for the Dons. Um, but yeah, no, like I say, the overall point, Motherwell have got a strong squad. They've got momentum. They've got confidence. They're a team that I think, similar to St Mirren, they can beat anyone. And obviously Aberdeen lacking that momentum. If you're asking me to put a bet on just now, yeah, I'm putting my money on Motherwell.
Here's a good point. And it is Aberdeen who they'll play because they went to Greenock Morton and dismantled them. Craig, Aberdeen have started the season fairly slowly, but maybe you could say two tough tasks in Hearts and, of course, Celtic at home. The dispatch of Morton fairly easily 3-0 in the end. Is this maybe a turn of the tide, as they would say in the Northeast?
Yes, I think so, but also at the same time, I think the league table telling a different story. The game at Tynecastle, they could have equalised or went on to win the game if they had an actual good striker up top. And same again with the Celtic game, they had a chance. I think it was at 1-0, where Yengi again blocks a shot from, I think it was Keskinen. So I think they have started not as bad as people are making out, but again, if you don't win games, it's not a good look. And obviously, a 3-0 win away to Greenock Morton, which is not an easy place to go, is a good sign, hopefully, for Aberdeen fans of things to come.
Absolutely. And yeah, Morton probably mainly wanting to stay in the division this season. Ethan, obviously, we know Transfer Scotland is a good friend of ours. He's a big Morton fan, or some would say Rangers fan. But yeah, he is indeed a Morton fan and was probably had a little bit of confidence going into this game, maybe on the back of some poor form from Aberdeen, but Morton on okay form themselves and stepping up to that level. Is that a kind of sign of what a Dougie Imrie side can do?
Yeah, I've seen Dundee go down to Capello plenty of times, and we've left disappointed. And it tends to be most of the time what they're quite good at. And there's not really a respectful way to say it. Like they bring you down to their level, and then they make it a real,
Yeah.
horrible game to watch. I think that was probably the best title we had last season for one of the podcast episode names. Was it Dougie Imre's Sexy Football or something like that? To take the pick out of Transfer Scotland for saying exactly that. They're trying to convince us that they're playing some nice stuff. And if that's your game plan, I mean, it works. I think it works pretty effectively. I've always been a big believer that if you have the ability just to simply make things awkward for the other team, that'll drag you quite far. Morton normally are quite good for that, especially when they play at home. But in this case, it proved to be too much. Now, Aberdeen, I've already kind of touched on it and said about momentum and confidence. When they had that amazing run last season, the first half of last season, they were on fire. Then they went like 18 games or something without a win. It's the momentum, it snowballed into something else, and there's still, I think, as I say, the cup works as a switch off. You're out of the league. It's like a reset. They got the result they wanted, desired. Maybe they'll kick on from here, but I think until you start getting the results in the league, you're still in that threat of this snowball carrying on, because at the end of the day, they still went to a place they were expected to come away with a victory. And of course, Yengi on the score sheet. Now, we need to watch this space because Yengi in the opening games has looked dreadful. And that's all I've seen from Aberdeen accounts from the games across Celtic and Hearts. Nothing about the game itself, about the play. Just everyone slating unanimously about Yengi. Um,
Yeah.
and in his case, I can remember a time where they deemed Sam Cosgrove to be a donkey, and then he just blew up and was a massive success
Yeah.
for Aberdeen. I can remember when Papa Gay was deemed to be a donkey,
Yeah.
and he was quite influential in that Scottish Cup final to get them over the line and win the Scottish Cup. Now they're saying Yengi's a donkey, so now either he's going to step up and he's going to win the fucking Ballon d'Or, or or they're going to be right. And because I think it was just a 1 year tap in, but like I say, they all count the same, and it's all about how they carry on from this, how they kick on. Will it work as a reset, or have I got a point here that until they get something in the league, fortunes will turn? It's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say that they all count the same. I seem to remember, and this might not go down well with some people, but Cristiano Ronaldo telling Chris MD that every goal is a 10 out of 10 because it's a goal. So that's what it matters to the second best player of all time. Then yeah, then that must be pretty important. The final of the four quarterfinals then is Livingston and Hibs away. They
Uh
were
huh.
too
Uh
much.
huh.
They were too much. Craig, disappointed to see the other half of Edinburgh in the next round, but a pretty solid start for them. And considering they had to play 120 minutes on Thursday, an all right display in Livingston as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a better display than what most people would have had them down for, and it also allowed some of new sign-ins to get a run out. The new goalkeeper Salinger started the game, and Kyoje got the first goal. Another new sign-in, which I think he was the £1 million sign-in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So it's good for him to get off the mark. And then, so yeah, after the excerpts of Thursday night, a 2-0 win away at Livingston isn't a bad result.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, obviously a pretty solid start. They are 2 games away from European group stage football. And one of the standouts so far is a man that I wanted at my own club, a man that was at your club, Ethan, Josh Mulligan, with an absolute screamer. Did you? I mean, we've already had these conversations when he was linked with Rangers. When I said to you that I wanted him based on what I had seen, you've obviously saw a lot more than me. This is nothing new to you.
No, it's not. I mean, I think he only really scored the one screamer for us, but we always kind of felt that if he just polished on his finishing or just his end product in general, then his ceiling is what he makes it. He's physically speaking, just what a specimen. When he's at full pelt, he just can't be stopped. He's so not just physical, but he has this ability where I wouldn't say he's particularly a good dribbler, but he has this thing about him where if the ball kind of ricochets off a couple of shins, it will always land back to his feet. It's just this complete unnatural ability to just carry on. He just can't get stopped. Um, and I don't think he's going to see out his full contract at Hibs. I think someone's going to end up buying him. I think Hibs will make a very pretty penny. Pardon me. I hope the microphone didn't catch that. Um, I think they'll catch a very pretty penny between him and Kieran Bowie. I think they're actually the ones to watch for Hibs this season. And Hibs overall, they're the opposite of Aberdeen. When I talk about snowballs, they're the snowball of the opposite effect. They've started this season the same way they ended last season. They're just on a good winning streak. Over the summertime, it's almost as if they've still been playing every week. When they came to Dens, they'd also played 120 minutes of European football. Yet they still had most of the ball. They didn't look like a team with any tired legs. They looked exceptionally fit. And I think probably right now at the time of recording, they'd be my favourites to finish third. They look excellent. They've recruited well, and
Not
obviously Kieran
second.
not well, uh, no, not yet.
No,
I
no, we'll take that spot.
well look at last season. Look at last season. Everyone thought Aberdeen were going to finish second. And it was just a case that once Rangers make the change, they get back to winning ways. They'll claim second spot, and I would predict that if things don't end well for Russell Martin, that the next guy they bring in probably would get them back to second at the very least. It's a very difficult thing to split the old firm in Scotland. So no, I'm not. I won't tip them for second. Not yet, anyway. Maybe wait a few weeks. We'll see. We'll see how that ages. But yeah, to answer your question though, with Josh Mulligan, anyone that's watched him, it's not a surprise. And like I say, he's him and Bowie for me. They're going to be the standout for Hibs this season. Um, and yeah, like I say, no surprise. Very good player. And if David Gray can coach Mulligan to the point where he's just a better all round player with his finishing, his crossing, then yeah, you've just got this. Your main priority when you come up against Hibs is just to kind of get on your knees, get some candles lit, say a few prayers, and then just hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like a good point to end it on. I certainly don't want to go and watch the second half, but I think that's where my night is unfortunately heading. It means that the next round of the Scottish League Cup we have Partick Thistle versus Celtic, Aberdeen versus Motherwell, Kilmarnock versus St Mirren, and Rangers versus Hibs. Just before we go, then we've obviously talked on Rangers' defensive errors. We've talked on Hibs' fine form so far under David Gray. Craig, they might be rubbing their hands at that trip to Ibrox and thinking that there's maybe a cup set on their hands.
Well, especially the record that they had against Rangers last season, obviously 2 draws, a win, at Ibrox. So yeah, they'll be looking forward to that one, and we'll have a very good chance of getting through that tie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ethan and Craig, for joining me tonight. Just before we do go, I will say that I think we are around 11 subscribers away from 400. If you could help us hit that before the end of August, that would be absolutely superb. But thank you again for tuning in to Salmon's Pizzeria.